Hello, and welcome to the Sacred Heart Shaman podcast, where we talk about spiritual healing, shamanic wisdom, and the challenges of walking the healer's path. My name is Nadia Harenkiu, and today's episode number 42, Seeing Only the Best in People, a Healer's Shadow Trap. Now, before I roll into my pre-recorded podcast, I want to first tell you guys about a few events that I have coming up in the event that you're interested in working with me in some capacity without a lot of commitment up front. So I do have a Q&A session about my upcoming shamanic immersion. That Q&A is held virtually over Meetup, and that will take place on the evening of August 8th. The other few things I have coming up are a guided past life regression, also virtual on August 17th, and a soul retrieval series. It's a 3-part series starting on Saturday, August 23rd. That series will take place once a week for 3 weeks. As with all of my work, if you choose to attend one of my events, it is entirely donation/sliding scale based, so don't ever let finances hold you back from getting the healing or experiences that you're looking for. You can find links to all of those events on my website, www.sacredheartshaman.com. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope you enjoy the podcast. Good morning, and thank you for joining me on the podcast today. On our podcast, we are going to be talking about a healer trap. So, as healers, we have many traps that we can fall into on the healing path. Some are more common than others, but if they are in existence, I have definitely worked with them or seen them personally or professionally. And today we're going to talk about one that's been coming up a lot recently, and that is seeing the best in people. So, on the surface level, this topic seems relatively superficial, but we're actually going to use it as a trailhead to take us into a much deeper, more complex view of this process of getting stuck in seeing the best in people. Now, this dynamic comes out most clearly in relationship with romantic partners, but you can also see it with business partners, friends, occasionally in business itself, or in other situations. So, today I'm going to talk about how it presents with regard to the dynamic between two people in a romantic relationship. And this does tie into some of the things I've talked about previously, including the relationship between sensitive people and narcissists. So, when you're a healer of any magnitude that is above and beyond like run of the mill normal healers, which I think most of the people who follow me on the podcast are in this category, you're always going to see the best version of somebody when you still have not claimed the best version of yourself. And so, as I've brought up before, this is like a matchy energy situation, like the whole law of attraction. You attract what you put out. This is the case when we're in a dynamic where we only see the best in someone. So you still have not claimed the best version of yourself, and you have like some undone shadow work around that, aka you haven't claimed your personal power. And because you haven't claimed who you are, you haven't stepped fully into the healer role. And you're going to have the tendency to attract somebody whose highest and best version is also in the shadow. And when I say highest and best version, I mean like the most heart-centered or heart-based version of them. Because the highest version of you as a healer is very much in your heart space. You're in a space of love. That space is very clear. And so what you're going to see in someone else is going to be their open, clear, heart-centered version. What this looks like specifically differs based on the person, but you can imagine what that means, what that looks like. So the ability to see the most pure, beautiful, or innocent form of a person and only being able to see that is because you're a high-level healer. And most of your high level gifts are in your shadow. So the depth of your shadow meets the depth of this other person's shadow, which is where their goodness or quote unquote goodness lives. I'm also going to have like a side note here about my terms. Please do not ever get attached to the verbiage that I choose to use, like good and bad, high and low. These aren't judgments, they're more like descriptors. Like nothing is inherently bad, nothing is inherently like not love or light at the end of the journey. So just don't get caught up in that. When I say good or high, it's usually like I'm speaking of a vibration that's close to love, the heart, um, and that's very different than bad or low, which is a dense vibration. It's very far away from the high vibration, very far away from the heart, sometimes with ill intent, that sort of thing. So this is like talking about heavens and cosmos versus talking about earth and hell. It's not good or bad per se, but I do use these words loosely, so don't get attached to any of them. So when we're the kind of person or this kind of healer that we're able to tune into the best version of someone in a romantic relationship, it's because we have unhealed wounds around loving ourselves, accepting ourselves, which is ultimately leading to not claiming our abilities fully. We tend to get trapped in these types of relationships where we see the best version of a person and then there's some kind of abuse or neglect or blindsiding when the true person emerges. Now, with these situations, they do tend to last quite a long time because we're in them due to our inability to accept ourselves. And there are many reasons that this could happen, like low self esteem or unworthiness, undeserving. That maybe we have fear of claiming that super magical part of ourselves. So we typically stay in this dynamic until they kind of destroy us, or put us under so much pressure to the point that we turn into a diamond. And then we pop out of them. We're able to see the potential versus the reality. And so tuning into the potential of a person is actually a healer gift. It's being able to tune into the highest presentation of a person, if you will. And as a healer, you can always tune into this best version of a person. But what you're doing with that information kind of guides your actions or guides your perspective. So try to follow me here. It's not linear, like I said. So we have a partner, we see the best version of them, and we miss the red flags because, we do. It's a thing. We're always going to tune into the best version and ignore the red flags as a part of our process to be forced into healing, to be forced into our power, if we are fighting the acceptance of that power or fighting the healing of whatever stands between us and claiming ourselves fully. This is like not a conscious thing that happens, it's very much an unconscious thing. But when we start to shed light on these topics and talk about them, the unconscious becomes conscious. So nobody does this on purpose, basically. But when we use that gift to see the best version of a person in our healing work, if we have embodied the healer of our, like the healer that resides within ourself, we can use this through facilitation. Like we can use these abilities in our sessions and visually see the best version of a person and pull that through. So this is like a form of shadow work. If I'm working with a client and the most open-hearted, like clear version of them is not sitting in front of me, it's locked away somewhere. If I can make eye contact with that part, if I can call it forward, if I can call it by name or identify it or help it feel seen, that's what brings the shadow into the light, right? And you can't do that without doing shadow work on yourself, without having like a good grasp of how to do that. So, this ability to see the best is amazing when it's used in the right containers, when you can use it on purpose instead of unconsciously. Now, the next aspect of this conversation is containers. So, when we put relationship constructs around a dynamic between you and another person, it turns it into a different issue. All right, I'm going to circle back to containers in just a moment. Let's talk about why this happens, why we tune into the potentiality so often because we're tuning into something that exists out there. It exists in the other world, in a different vibrational plane, in an area that's not technically Earth. And if it's out there, it's not here. It's not based in reality. It's not happening in front of you in 3D. And that denial of reality is not an uncommon pitfall in the healing world or as healers, because the majority of healers on this planet right now don't want to be here. They don't enjoy the density. They don't like the drama. They don't like the trauma of being human. And there's so much suffering right now. They just don't want to be here. So there is a level of denial of reality, which is denial of the 3D. And that denial prevents you from being fully grounded and fully able to like drop in and see what's in front of you. Okay, cool. I understand, Nadia. Now what? So let's talk about how to be fully rooted in reality. This is an ongoing, multi step process of coming into your body fully. When people aren't able to fully come into their body, there's a reason, and it's usually unresolved trauma, whether it's personal, familial, or collective. And how you go about resolving or integrating that depends on you, and it depends on where you are in your path. Now, this is everything from like soul retrieval to somatic therapy, trauma therapy, yoga, working with plant spirits like tobacco. And you're going to use all the tools in the available toolbox. It's never going to be this one thing that works to heal your trauma. It's going to be everything. So you have to get comfortable with that idea as well, that there's always going to be more. So it's a process. And I can tell you that, like most people that I put my hands on, maybe 40 or 50% of them is always outside of their body. Being grounded is a huge issue. And and we can even go deeper into that and talk about electronics and television and AI and the way that our work is set up and our lifestyles are set up. It is designed to be disconnected. So it's not your fault. It's none of our faults, but it is something that we need to be aware of and we need to consciously tend to. So it's pretty rare for someone to be in their body full time. Now, this is one of the things that I teach people how to do. And it's like the coolest part of what I do, how to be in 3D and in the other space at the same time. It's like shaman work. But in order to do that, in order to be in both worlds at the same time, you have to fully accept both realities at the same time. Whether or not you like Earth or the way things are run here has nothing to do with your ability to accept it, but we let it get in the way. Or not accepting that we're magical beings who can access the other reality. A lot of people don't want to do that because of religious trauma or belief systems around what God actually is, stuff like that. So you have to fully accept and be willing to be here on Earth and fully accept and be willing to be a badass star being who lives in another dimension that you can't ever really see or understand. It's a complicated thing, right? And it's asking a lot of each of us. And if we want to put the masculine feminine construct around this, like masculine is 3D, feminine is everything you can't see. And we need a balance of both of those things. So, if you struggle with this concept of only being able to see the best in people and then being blindsided in their behavior or unable to see the reality, this is most likely what you're dealing with. But it may not come up for you in romantic relationship. It might be like with regard to yourself or with money or with your business. It means that there's a great need to integrate the human and the spirit on a deeper level and really understand why you're not able to be in the 3D reality fully. So when it comes to money, it would be like you can access abundance consciousness, but then you struggle with the practicality of money, like spending money that you don't have or being too far into the flow and not looking at practical considerations like paying a mortgage or your bills, stuff, things that we need in order to operate in this reality. You can tell when there's dissonance with the way you view yourself because you'll have feelings about how you look in photos or in the mirror. or the way you perceive yourself is not the way other people perceive you, either positively or negatively, both of which suggest that there is a denial of reality on some level. Now, the second part of this conversation, or maybe the added depth to this conversation, is the severity and the depth that you will encounter with your interpersonal relationships, and seeing the best in someone will depend on the type of healer you are and the type of trauma that you have. So for example, if you're with an extremely like dangerous narcissist, you are likely an extremely gifted healer. You're going to be paired up with the situation that matches your magnitude. So if your person that you see the best in is like extremely manipulative, extremely abusive, very covert, it's likely that all of your gifts are in equal measure hidden behind you and equal measure powerful. So it is, an interesting thing to think about. Then the other part is, what do I want to call it? Intention or container. So we talked about before relationship dynamics and how this comes through in a relationship. A relationship is a container, and a container has a certain intention. This is something we work with a lot in shamanic work or through ritual. And it's a really important thing to grasp because it does impact everything in your life. So, as a human, if you're building a relationship, you're building a container with another person that holds the entity that is your relationship. And your intention for that container sets the stage of what's going to come out of it. So, for example, if you're in your relationship dynamics, what you're seeking in a partner, if you're not like fully conscious and aware and coming to the table as like a full ass human, what you're seeking is likely subconscious. It's likely not really known to you until later down the road. For example, like people will go into a relationship seeking a partner who will like take care of them or be a good co-parent or will make them happy or will make them feel safe or whatever the thing is, right? So you're bringing that intention into the container of the relationship, whether you need it, whether you know it or not, and the other person is doing the same thing. So you're creating this container together, and containers are places where things can grow, evolve, clear, um, conflict. It just depends. So when you bring it into the container, this is now a dynamic that happens between the two of you, and it plays out. This is your intention. This is your container. This is the stage for the relationship. So when you have someone like a covert narcissist and a highly sensitive person, you will often have like the highly sensitive person hasn't claimed their power yet. They haven't claimed their magic. They're still maybe in a victim. They're still maybe in a like weakness role. And then they have someone who is all about the power and all about being basically the god of their own universe. A lot of entitlement, a lot of control. That's what the undeveloped healer unconsciously seeks out a lot of the time. So when I'm talking about intentions and like beliefs around relationships and containers that we're building, this is rarely a conscious thing until you are pretty far down the healing path. And all of these qualities about you, like your belief around relationships, like what you're seeking, they're very much dependent on how you were raised, what you were exposed to in society, who you are, like as a person, like what your path is. And so try not to be too down on yourself about it. This is just for illumination purposes that we talk about this. And if you feel like you struggle in your life with missing the red flags, with missing the obvious things, this is a great opportunity to talk to the people around you and be like, hey, like, what are you seeing that I'm not seeing? What are you observing? Maybe with your job, with your partnership, with something else that's going on in your life. The people around you are most likely going to be able to identify it way before you will. And if you keep ending up in this space of like, I don't know how I got here, I don't know how I didn't see this further, this topic is for you. It's something to really consider and mull over. Now, in terms of the next level of this conversation, which is what happens when we deny reality, that is a whole different topic. So, thank you for joining me on the podcast today. This is one of the great healer pitfalls that most of us fall into at some point on our healing journey. And I'm sure that I will talk about many more in the future. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to know more about me and my work, you can find me at www.sacredheartshaman.com.